Good morning. Welcome to Saturday Morning Coffee. My name is Lance Mckinnon, and I am here with my co-host, Tiffany Linderman. Good morning, Tiffany. How are you?
Good morning. Cheers. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic today. I hear we have a special guest today from a different part of the world. Do you want to
We
introduce our guest?
we absolutely do. I am very honored and thrilled. We have Liam Ryan, who is from the beautiful and sunny Ireland. How are you doing, Liam?
Hello, Tiffany and Lance. I'm doing
Hello.
great, and it's so good to see you both. I'm the one person of the three of us who can't say good morning because it's 3:40 p.m. over here in Ireland.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon in Ireland to spend time with us and share your amazing story.
Yeah, it's
We
great to
read
be
your,
here. Great to see you both.
yes, read your bio and everything else, and it's so inspirational that we just knew that our listeners would are going to take something away from what your story is all about.
Great.
And Tiffany, what can you say?
I can just say that you might want to have a box of tissues ready. I will tell you that I came prepared. I'll say that much. But really, when I found and met Liam out in the first place, his story just was extremely inspiring, and I'm going to let him tell all the details. But he took on challenges that I think some of us in our lives will never, ever, ever deal with, and he absolutely overcame them. He's like, I am the man. I'm going to beat this, and I can't wait to hear it from you. So I'd love to turn it over to you to share a little bit more about what you've gone through.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks very much. Well, it's just great to be here, and I think to start off, one of the big appeals of my story is that I'm so ordinary. I'm a very ordinary guy from a little place in Ireland, and this story has reached all over the world at this stage, including this morning. I think it's my very first time to be based in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and as Lance says, it goes all over America from there. But and it took me a while. I mean, I began to get emails about 4 or 5 years later from all over the English-speaking world, and I realized then I was carrying something extremely powerful and extremely inspirational for so many people. And as I said to you, Tiffany, if I ever doubted that myself, all I had to think of was what I would have meant to myself if I met myself 19 years ago. You're looking for somebody who has just done what you now need to do. So we'll begin there. It was 2002. I was living in a lovely little town in Ireland with my wife, Pam, and our three small boys. We were two architects working from home. And as I say to people, if you wind the clock back to then, it was very hard to find anything that was wrong in my life. We lived in this lovely place. We had plenty of work. We had a lovely community around us. You could say it was almost too good to be true, and so it turned out. About in April 2002, I began to get intermittent headaches, and the medics like that part of my story because I am the classic case of somebody who doesn't get cancer. I had never smoked. I had never carried weight. I had run 6 marathons up to that point in my life. And they use it, and I use it ever since, to show the falsehood of that line. There is nobody who doesn't get cancer. It is just a predatory disease that can strike anybody, anytime. So I started off with my local GP, and the thinking was I had a sinus infection. There was no reason to think anything else. So she put me on medication, and was clever enough to book me in a week later, knowing a typical man and busy man, that if she didn't give me that prompt, I might have left it for longer. So when I went back to the doctor, I still had the headaches. Now they were mild and they weren't stopping me working. They weren't like a migraine. But she said, okay, it looks as if you do have a sinus infection, but one that's too strong for medication. I'm going to book you into your local hospital, and they'll do a very routine procedure that's called a sinus wash. And it's literally where they'll go into your sinus and they'll flush under your under anesthetic, obviously, and they'll flush out the infection in your sinus. So about a week later, I went into my local hospital in Limerick, is my nearest city. It's the third city in Ireland. And the fall was huge because I went in for this routine procedure. Everybody I met was fantastic, including my ENT consultant. We got on like a house on fire. We were about the same age, similar sense of humor. I had a wonderful ward sister and all the nursing staff were incredible. So I turned to Pam at one point and I said, I could do one of these every year. This is fantastic. You know, a routine procedure, my locker piled high with treats, a whole load of newspapers I didn't get to read for the previous week. I was off the grid. Nobody could ring me. I thought I'm going to have a real rest in here for 2 days. So he came around the next morning, brought me down for the sinus wash. We were laughing and joking as I went into the ward. He said, look, I went into the theater. He said, I've done thousands of these. You'll be under for about 20 minutes. We'll flush it out. You'll be back in the ward and I'll be around to see you in the morning. That was all I knew from my side of the anesthetic at that point. And the next day, any cancer survivors watching this piece now will relate to the next day. None of us forget the day the news was broken. And in my particular case, I remember it distinctly. I was sitting up in the bed. I think I was dressed because the only issue left was, as far as I was concerned, was what time I was going home at. And I saw John Fenton and Carmel O'Sullivan was my ward sister coming towards the ward. And they had a whole line of people behind them, which I later discovered were medics and students who were brought along for the experience of this huge case being broken to the patient. And as they came into the room, I just sensed there's something not right here. I was laughing and joking with these people yesterday, and it's as if they don't know me. So he kept coming to the bed, didn't say a word, just pulled the curtain around me, and he leaned down right into me, and he said, Liam Ryan, this is very serious. And he wouldn't use the word cancer until he had a scan the following day. But I knew by his demeanor and by his tone that the whole bottom just fell out of my world. I knew. I mean, even then you'd think, is there, am I going to survive this? You knew by the delivery, this was extremely serious. So the next day, Pam came in and we went to see him, and he had a scan at that stage. And he went on to tell me, in all his time, he said, you've got the second worst case of head and neck cancer I've ever seen. He said, you've got a massive tumor. It has filled your sinus. It's gone around your eye, backed up against both your brain and your top of your spine, which makes the likelihood of mental or physical damage extremely likely in any surgery. And he said, you're so unlucky that you got no advance warning of this, and it's already stage 4. One consultant in Liverpool later told me mine was so advanced, we could have called it stage 44. And you're there, as I said, I was laughing and joking 24 hours earlier. I use a line of, you're thrown out of an airplane without a parachute. You are just plummeting into the complete unknown. So he told me that day, he said, there are only a handful of surgeons. He said, once it's in the head so advanced, the surgery is just so complex and so risky. So he said to me, there's only a handful of surgeons in the world, probably, who could even look at your case. But he said, the other difficulty you have is it's so advanced, it won't all be removed surgically. There'll be tumor left behind. So he said, you're also going to need a radical radiotherapist who will write a special program just for you to attack where he or she surmises the tumor is remaining. Somebody who will just close the textbook, put all their insurance on the line, and write a special radiotherapy program just for you. So he told me that day, he said, if they do exist, the chances are the surgeon will be in New York, but the radiotherapist will be in Tokyo. He said, you need the two of them in Limerick, Ireland now, because the clock was ticking. I had a month to live. So Tiffany and Lance, I have some great lines, and one of them is, in the blackest of holes, there are still the most amazing chinks of light. And the chink of light was standing in front of me. Myself and John Fenton had actually become great friends over 2 days, let alone rather than consultant and patient. And I was able to ask him the question, ultimate question you can ever ask any consultant. And that is, what would you do if this was you? You personalize it for them so that you don't get the stock answer off the shelf and I put him in my shoes. So it turned out he had spent 3 years in Liverpool in England in what he regarded as a center of excellence for head and neck cancer. And he said to me, it's probably the best in Europe, and it's on a par with a lot of what you'd get in America. Maybe in the biggest cities, they might have a better facility in New York or LA or Chicago, but in the main, the facility in Liverpool, he said, is as good as I've ever seen. So he said, if I was you, I'd go to Liverpool. But he conditioned it. He said, I don't think they're going to say anything different to you than what I've just said. I think you're beyond treatment. The surgery is just too dangerous, too complex. But he said, over there, at least I'm only an ENT consultant. You'll be in the hands of people familiar with this case. And head and neck, this is 20 years ago, head and neck was still a little bit rare. It's got more common these days, but it's not as well known as lung or liver or breast cancer. As you know, there are a lot more prominent cancers than head and neck. Chink of light was that because he knew them in Liverpool, he could lift the phone and get me a referral within a week. Whereas I still might have found Liverpool or Sydney or New York on the internet 2 months later, but it would have been too late because the tumor would have taken over at that point. So everything was critical at this point. Having been told I had a month to live and he didn't think there was anybody could treat me, all I wanted then was an open door, was somebody who'd say, we'll give you a shot. Even dying had gone out of the equation at this point. If I was going down, I wanted to go down in the ring with my gloves on. You know, it's amazing how quick your mind will filter through things when it needs to. So I didn't have time to worry about dying. What I had to worry about was a hospital that will say, we'll give you a shot. A week later, Pam and myself went to Liverpool. We met Simon Rogers, who's the chief maxillofacial surgeon in Aintree University Hospital, and David Husband, who is the head radiotherapist in a second hospital, Clatterbridge Hospital. And what's lovely about Living On is both of those two men in that session also decided this guy isn't going to make it. But they're incredible people because they're not just assessing your condition, they're also assessing you. Could you cope if you did survive? Obviously, with the problem for every head and neck patient is severe disfigurement afterwards. But in my case, the projections were even way worse than that. If I lived for 2 or 3 years, even in a vegetative state, it still would have been an incredible success story because I was alive. So the likelihood was I would be blind, deaf, dumb, or more critically, mentally or physically impaired because of the tumor being so close to brain and spine. I was so tough then, I didn't care. If I was alive, I was winning and cancer was losing. And again, I'm convinced we all have a store of resolve in us, a secret store, and you don't know what's there until you need to go look. You know, if God forbid there was a bomb dropped in Lancaster County tomorrow, you'd be amazed what would rise out of the ashes. You know, people don't just give up in extreme scenarios. So I think that was my bit in the equation. I was delighted with, once I went into myself, what I found. And I wasn't whimsical about, oh, how will I look? Or it was just lean, stay alive, because cancer is your enemy and it wants to kill you. You don't worry about what version of alive you end up. And in all honesty, I wouldn't have survived without that bulletproof approach. You know, I didn't, if I drifted into, oh, how will I look and will I be a freak? It just would have eked out of me. You know, it would have punctured my resolve, really. So in that session, and Pam as well, they're also looking at your family. Could they cope? Could they push around somebody in a wheelchair if they had to, or feed them, or whatever it is? Pam, my wife, was an essential unsung hero in the story as well, because, and I say that to all carers and family, friends of patients, you are the people who have us here today, and you don't get to credit. Everybody was telling me what I needed to do, but there was nobody to tell Pam that, you know, she had 3 small children and the likelihood was her husband was going to die. So the ripple effect of all of these stories is huge. And I like to include those ripples every time I tell it, because without those people, none of us would be here. So in that session, they communicated to each other in body language and sign language, both letting each other know we don't think he's going to make it, but God damn him, he's ticked all the other boxes. He's shown us the spirit he's got great acceptance. He knows he's likely to die, and he still wants to go for it. So between them, they said, well, we don't think he's going to make it, but we've got to give him a shot. Now, I'm telling you all this now because my surgeon told me that about 3 years later in his car when he knew he could, because I was there mad alive beside him, you know. And that's why I say he knew then if he told me he didn't believe I was going to make it, it just would have drained out of me. You know, I'm going, you're wheeling me down to theatre and you don't think I'm going to make it. So what am I supposed to think? So I asked them in the room. So then they said, yes, we're prepared to operate. And I didn't know then what the background scenario was. And I said, well, tell me, please, honestly, what do you think my chances are? And Simon Rogers, to his credit, extremely clever. He invented a figure of 5%. And it's brilliant if you think about it. It's so low, you know, my gosh, that chance is, you know, I've got very little chance. But it's not zero. You know, he gave me something to fight for. And my operation was, of course, when they said, we'll treat you, I wanted the operation to be tomorrow because I could feel this thing growing in me at that stage. But my surgery was so big, it took a month to repair. So, and this is the learning curve for the patient. You know, Tiffany, you're a nurse. I had no clue what any of you did before I got sick. Now I have the ultimate appreciation for all of you, because if it wasn't for people like you, there wouldn't be people like me. So they sent us back to Ireland. They said, right, you've got a month to prepare. And a great friend of mine rang me and he said, Liam, I hear you've been given a 5% chance. And I was a bit tentative at that point. And I said, yes, I have. And he said, that's great news. Because he said, if it's 1 in 100, Liam, I'd pick you every time. And he almost turned me into, I'd had 5 times more chance than I needed. And that's where you need to go. It's like, I'm going to the Olympics and all I have to do is win a medal. You know, you don't look at the larger portion of the, where most people are going to be. You look at, there's no reason why it can't be me who comes home with the gold medal, or why it can't be me who's the 5 in 100. And it was a real turning point in my mindset, because he just said, if it's 5 in 100, why, you're in my top 5 every time. And you need to go there. You need to, don't let the doubts hold you back. Push yourself into literally, if I'm going to the Olympics, I'm going to be the one coming back with the gold medal. That kind of mentality. So then I had a month to prepare. What do? I decided, both in my head and in my body, I need to be the best specimen of Liam Ryan possible going on that slab. So I went out and ran every day. And running was brilliant because it ticks 2 great boxes. You're obviously getting fit. It's also very good for your head. It's not like a team sport where you have things to do, or when you're running, you have complete thinking time. And I just made myself, I dealt with dying, I dealt with everything. I just made myself as strong as I possibly could be. I had adopted the role at that point of, it's my job to help my medics as best as I possibly can by making myself the best patient I can absolutely be. So I literally had no fear. And part of that was not being afraid to go. You know, I had convinced myself that if I was to go, I wanted to be able to clench my fist on my deathbed and say, Liam Ryan, this has been through no fault on your part. And the strength that gives you is phenomenal, because literally cancer has no hold on you after that. Now, it's not easy, and it's not everybody can go there, but if you can, it just means you haven't got an Achilles heel in your fight. So that's the patient that went back to them a month later. I went down to surgery. I'll tell a little sub-story here, Tiffany. On the way, it was a long corridor, well, a series of corridors down. The theatre was a long way away, and I remember there was a little multi-denominational church in the hospital in Liverpool. It was a massive hospital. And I remember as I passed it on the trolley, I just clenched my fist and I just looked upstairs and I said, if I come back, if I get to return this January, you're going to be my first port of call. And if you have faith, it's an extra dimension in your strength. You need everything. You need your family, your community. You need to, cancer is not a disease you can dictate to. But if you have faith, it gives you an extra dimension beyond this world. So at some of the lowest times of my pain and discomfort, there was always a belief that there is a better world waiting for us all. And I always like to include that little bit in when I tell the story, in that it gave me strength I couldn't have got anywhere else. But that was a nice little scene when literally they had the sheet right up over me, and the fist just came out the side of the trolley, and it said, if we come back this way, I'm coming in to see you. My surgery was 12 hours. He told me it's as big as it comes. I lift the eye patch, if you can see, everything dropped down. He sat on my bed 3 days later when I was in intensive care. I had a tracheostomy. I was being fed with a peg tube. I couldn't speak. And Simon Rogers, my surgeon, just explained what he did. And my God, I had no appreciation for what these people do. He said they cut me from my ear across to my nose. They broke my jaw. They cut down to my Adam's apple. They literally peeled away my jaw. They removed all the tumor all the soft tissue tumor they could get in the sinus. They followed it around the eye. It was so advanced at that stage, it had eaten into my cheekbones. So they had to remove a lot of cheekbone. They took out half the roof of my mouth, half my top set of teeth. Then when they were happy, they had removed as much of the tumor as they could access. Sorry, before that, they also had to sever all the various sinews and nerves going through the top of the spine up to my brain. That was very intricate work, he said, in itself, because they all had to be later reattached. He described it as like working on the engine in your car. You have to disconnect all the hoses and pipes it's making to the rest of the car. They're not doing anything wrong, but they're getting in your way. And then the very last job would be to reconnect everything going back to the brain. At that point, I just had a massive hole in my head on the slab, so they had to take bone out of off my hip to try and rebuild the cheek, and they took a lot of lining from my stomach to reseal the massive hole in my face, including I have a flap to the roof of my mouth. The greatest miracle of all is that I can speak, because nobody could have predicted how well the jaw would have gone back. I can only open my mouth half an inch, but as you can all hear all over the USA, I can speak perfectly, almost as if God has left me the gift of my speech to tell this great story. So they put the jaw back together with I think I have 5 screws in there with the hip bone connected in. They rebuilt the face as best they could, and then he had to stitch me with 130 stitches from the ear back down to the Adam's apple, and the 130 were tiny to minimize facial scarring. And I first-hand knowledge of them, because when a nurse came to take them out about a week or 10 days later, it took her nearly 3 hours, because they were about the same size as my facial hairs at that point. And she spent ages looking to find them before she could snip. And they're the pluses for me, Tiffany. The learning curve of what I now know about what you all do is invaluable in itself. I did not meet one person I was in 3 hospitals who was not brilliant. So by now I was in intensive care. I was pretty serious looking. I had about 15 tubes coming out of me. I looked like the Elephant Man in the head. And I had the plan at that point then was to recover as quick as I could so that we could begin radiotherapy so that the tumor wouldn't get a chance to reestablish itself. But I had 2 major setbacks. Because everything was opened up to the brain, I was wide open for about a meningitis, which I did get. Pam, my great white, picked it up before anybody else, because she just knew I was going backwards rather than forwards. I was rushed to the neuro wing of the same hospital. I was extremely critical for 3 days. I was in a coma for 2 of them. I don't remember any of this myself. And it was ironic that he goes and gets one of the worst forms of cancer ever, and he dies from meningitis. But anyway, that didn't happen, but that's what was on the cards for a day or two. My sisters came over from Ireland to be with me because it looked as if I wasn't going to make it. Then once I got out of hospital, I got a deep vein thrombosis because I had a lot of clotting in the veins from the surgery. My leg swelled up, and that was also a major emergency when I was also rushed back to hospital. So I started radiotherapy about a month later than what everybody hoped, but I did, and I must admit I enjoyed radiotherapy because I was an outpatient now, and it was social. You're meeting other cancer patients, and I was back in the real world. You're just itching to, toe by toe, return to normality to some degree. I had 7 weeks of extensive chemoradiotherapy, and they were amazed how well I held up. And I had a beard for a lot of the time, and I think it protected my skin where a lot of the surgery had taken place. So they reckon that the staff there told me my skin stood up to the levels of radiotherapy I was experiencing a lot more than I had expected. I still have my old radiotherapy mask here beside me, so I was bolted to the table every day so that you're in exactly the same position for the machine to know where the rays to go in. I'll skip to how are we doing for time? Are we okay?
You're on mute, Lance. You're good. I'd say
good.
Keep going.
No, you're still good. You're
okay.
Good.
Well, at that point, Lance, I remember the day I opened my eyes in the surgery. That was a huge hurdle because that was the biggest expectation, that I wouldn't survive the surgery. So I didn't put any pressure on myself then. I said, right, I will accept whatever level this recovery comes back to. Be it blind, be it dumb, be it mental impairment if it was. I knew that the cards were against me to be alive. So I couldn't complain what version of alive was going to be. So we came back to Ireland. I was very fragile. I was going to bed about 3 times a day. I only had enough energy for an hour or two, and then I'd go back to bed. So piece by piece over the next 2 years, things started to go back into place. And I'll tell you what I did. I eventually got bored with just recuperation and daytime TV, and you're itching to do normal things again, to be part of the real world, go down to a shop and buy a pint of milk, or, things that you took for granted for so long, let alone going to work or whatever. But yet I had so little energy. There was very little I could do. But at that point I said, a nice exercise to do would be to write an account of what I've been through. And what I liked about that was I could do it on the laptop or the computer and do it for 10, 15 minutes, get tired, leave it, go back to it a week later, remember another little bit, and so on. But I did it for myself. I wanted to preserve my own record of my own disease, if you like. And I knew I'd always remember the main names, but I'd forget the name of the little Filipino nurse who brought me my first glass of water, or, the little finer details of the story. So I wrote it over about 2 months, and it was about 8 A4 pages when it was done. Without that script, we wouldn't be here today, because family, first of all, knew I'd written it and said, can we read it? And then friends of friends heard about it. And then somebody sent it into the local paper, who, when they read it, said, we have to publish this exactly as it is. And it was too long for one article. They did it over consecutive articles over 2 weeks. And then it just spread by itself. And about 18 months, 2 years later, I started to get emails from Canada, New Zealand, Australia, all over America, Britain, all over Europe. And the greatest one said, I was giving up until I read your story. So at that point, I knew I have something here that is priceless, invaluable to people. And I'm back to, I knew what I would have done for me had I met myself 19 years ago. So it was around then I just said, right, I've got a role here to spread this story freely I don't look to make anything from it, because I'm only too happy to still be here that it selected me to do it. And I like the purity of that. I'm a cancer survivor, directly connecting to a cancer patient, knowing exactly where they are, because that's where I was, and I know what this story will mean to them. So by 2012, which was the 10th anniversary, there was no doubt that my recovery was complete. My second life had completely caught up with my first. I was back working, I was back running. I was doing everything I had done before. As I say, I can only open my mouth half an inch, but there's still nothing I can't eat. I just shuffle in. You know, if I'm eating a burger, a bit of bread, a bit of meat, a bit of lettuce, it all goes in, not in the same way as it did before. You know, if I was on a soft diet for the rest of my life, I'd still be down on my hands and knees, grateful for that. So it's the recovery that has made this story as big as it is. 19 years later, nobody could have predicted I'd still be here. And when I meet I go to Liverpool every year now to see Simon Rogers, and I'm very at a conference of some kind. I can get a bit immune to it. I tell it so often, you know, and he just tells me, he said, Liam, nobody has come along ever since, even close to you. And the longer you live, the bigger it gets, you know. And that's really good for me to hear, because it brings me right back down to where I was, you know. So it's 2012, and I was my own toughest critic. I said, "Whoa, hold on now. Are you sure you're fully recovered?" I said, "I want to do two things to achieve that. I want to run my first marathon post-cancer, and I want to write a book." And the book was so that the story would be preserved for all time and left behind me, you know. And the marathon was the physical proof that my body could do 10 years later what it had been doing in the 10 years on the run up to 2002. So in 2012, I did both of those things. And I said, right, that's it now. That book ended the end of this survival and recovery story. From now on, it's Liam Ryan getting on with the rest of his life. And the rest of my life has been talking to the wonderful Tiffany and Lance in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Loads of people on LinkedIn I meet every day. And I am full of my second life, and every day, and I know it's a cliche, every day has been a bonus, but it has in my case. I should have died many times in 2002. And that's the message I want to give out for every day I live on, as in how happy I am to be alive, to be here to meet you two this morning, you know, two more great people in my life. So that's really on LinkedIn, Tiffany, that's what I hope comes across in me. I'm not here to make a book or to have an ego. I just love being alive, and I really appreciate and will never stop appreciating it that somebody decided to hand me a wonderful story 19 years ago. I'm going to shut up now for a few minutes.
That was absolutely amazing, and probably the most powerful, faithful testimony I have ever heard. That was truly moving, and that you know that faith led you here, and
Unbelievable.
God had given you a gift to share a message to the world.
Yeah.
And you're changing lives every single day. You just changed my life. Just from hearing your story, you know, and I know that you're going to continue to change lives through this.
Well, it's just the story. I don't have to do any work. The story does all the work, you know. And it's lovely when I speak. I'm not a speaker. I'm a storyteller. Somebody else is trying to sell you an inspiration, you know, something. I just tell the story, and it's factual. So take it or leave it. It's not as if I'm trying to spin something, and it just makes it very easy for me. The story does the work. You know, it's just phenomenal.
That is truly amazing, and I know that you have touched me, and I am extremely grateful and thankful that you've taken your time in Ireland to talk to us in Lancaster, Pennsylvania on Saturday Morning Coffee to share this amazing story. And I know that and you had made reference to, it has changed other people's lives.
Yeah.
We have we have another gentleman who is airing today, Bruce Killian.
Yes.
And he has a great cancer survivor story as well. And my goodness, I would love for you two to connect.
Sure.
Because he knew by faith that this wasn't the end all, that God had a plan for him.
That's right.
To be able to help other people.
That's right.
The similarities of what you were saying and how Bruce said it, two different ways, but but at the same conclusion, it came down to faith.
Yes. It's amazing. Yes. And I do. Literally, he changed his mind and sent me back and gave me a new role. And I have a nice line on that. I didn't. I survived in 2002, so that I can die better. That I have achieved so much more in the last 19 years than I did in the 40 years up to then. And I mean that in a nice way. I mean that in achievement, in connecting with people, meeting people. I get lovely messages, genuine messages every day on LinkedIn from people, and they've all become friends. They're not potential customers or any of that nonsense. This story has brought me to a whole level that I never would have known without it, and it's wonderful to connect with people. And everybody has a mountain to climb, no matter who you are, rich, poor. And I think faith gives you that extra dimension that, well, look, we're all going in the same direction, and the rewards probably won't be here, but if we live this life well, they will be waiting for us somewhere else. And when you have that in your heart, there's nothing you can't take on.
That is so true. And Liam, I know it's Saturday morning here and Saturday afternoon in Ireland, and I know that we have all been moved and touched. And I know that you probably have things you got to do this afternoon as we'll get going here on Saturday as well. And I know this message is going to go across the United States again. But I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for
taking
Lance. Time to share this story with us, and also give us that motivation to, no matter what we're going through, that we can get through it, and everything happens for a reason. It may seem bad, but the result is, somebody has to cross the river first in order to help somebody else. And that is truly amazing. And that's my closing statement. Tiffany, what do you have?
I just need to say, I'm first off extremely inspired, but I'm like almost speechless. I don't even know what to say. Your story, I love the quote that you said, the darkest of holes allows you to see the light, and just, you found a new thing to aim for. And the fact that you've made it your life's mission to really be able to share that message and make an impact on others' lives. And I just need to touch on one thing, because this is essentially how we came to be, is that you light a candle, and I don't want to give this away completely, but I don't know if it's every day, what frequency you're doing it, but you're essentially spreading blessings and love to the world every day by lighting a candle and spreading it across the world. And that touched my heart, and I know you make it so personal the way you do it. You really have a heart of gold, and I just cannot thank you enough for spending time with us today, and all of the wonderful viewers of SMC.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you. I cannot compete with that. I will agree with Tiffany. Truly amazing, and thank you very much for being with us today. Go enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you, Lance.
In the background, and thank you very much, all the way from Ireland. That's absolutely beautiful.
My pleasure.
That you take time to be on Saturday Morning Coffee. So
thank you.
It's our honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now take care.
Great. All the best.